What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here. Welcome to day 93 of the 365-day graphic novel review challenge. Today, I want to talk to you about Superman, Bizarro's World. Party time! Excellent! Connor, if you're watching this, I hope that you appreciated that reference. So this is the first time that we see Bizarro since he was reintroduced in the Superman comics in the Man of Steel miniseries in 1986. If you haven't read that miniseries, slight spoilers for it, but Bizarro was introduced there and then he was killed off, and then we hadn't seen him again until this story here, which was like almost 10 years later. And I was really surprised by that. I was thinking that surely a character like Bizarro, that everyone else likes more than I do, that he would have shown up a lot more in the Superman comics. And I've never liked Bizarro. I've always found that he was really annoying, that he's kind of a one-note character. I don't really like his backwards opposite speech, so I wasn't really looking forward to reading this. But then when I was thinking about it and I was realizing that Bizarro hasn't shown up that much in the 80s or 90s comics, I was thinking, okay, I can take one Bizarro story every 10 years, that's fine. And this story isn't horrible, but I do wish that it was a little bit different than what we get here. So basically, Lex Luthor, he is dying, or Lex Luthor Jr., his body is deteriorating. And as you know, if you've been watching these videos and reading the Superman comics from the early 90s, Lex Luthor, he faked his death, and then he put his brain into a cloned body of himself, and then he's passing himself off as his son. Well, now his body is starting to deteriorate, and so he has one of his scientists create a new Bizarro clone so that they can study it and try to find some way to save Lex. And I really like that that's their reason for bringing back Bizarro. Otherwise, it would have just been, hey, we need to find some weird, lame reason to bring back Bizarro. I really like that it's tied to Luthor's body degenerating. I think that's a very good reason to bring back Bizarro. It ties in with the long game continuity of this series, with Lex pretending like he's a better person than his father was. I really like that all that is tied in with Lex Luthor. And it makes sense because Bizarro was tied with Lex Luthor in the Man of Steel miniseries. What I don't like is that 4/5 of this book is just Bizarro flying around Metropolis, trying to do things that Superman would do, or that he thinks that Superman would do, and then he kidnaps Lois because in his own weird, twisted way, he's in love with her. And then finally, that all gets wrapped up, but it's about 4/5 of the way into this book. And then the last chunk of it is Lois and Superman trying to save Bizarro from Lex and his scientists, because they're basically going to dissect Bizarro and see if they can find some way to save Lex, and Superman and Lois are trying to save Bizarro because they've kind of come to care for him. And then this book ends on a huge cliffhanger. Superman is in the middle of space, and then something explodes. It's this thing that was in the lab that caught on fire, and then Lois finds out that Lex is much more sick than everyone in Metropolis thought, because there were rumors floating around that Lex was sick, but nobody knew that it was this bad. And then the book just ends, and that's really aggravating for two reasons. Number one, the book spent so much time on Bizarro doing his Bizarro antics, and then at the last little bit, we get a little bit of a different plot, and I feel like this book didn't have to end on a cliffhanger. I feel like we could have condensed the Bizarro stuff in the first 4/5 of this book, and then we could have resolved what's going on here and not had this end on a cliffhanger. And that's also a little bit aggravating because, as far as I know, there isn't a trade paperback that picks up immediately where this one leaves off. We get the next one is, I think, the death of Clark Kent, I think, and it's a little bit after this. So that's a little bit frustrating because whenever you're reading this, at first you're probably thinking, okay, we had Lex Luthor Jr. in the Death of Superman books, and he had more hair than any human being on the planet. And then in the later Superman books in the late 90s and early 2000s, he's back to being evil. Lois and Clark know that he's evil. He's back to being bald. And at first you're probably thinking, okay, this is going to be the transition period that gets us from Lex Luthor Jr. to just normal Lex Luthor, who's a little bit younger than he was in the Man of Steel miniseries. And it sort of is, but then it ends right before it starts to do that. It ends on a huge cliffhanger, and ordinarily that wouldn't bother me if we got to see where the cliffhanger leads to. But in this case, unless I'm missing one of the Superman trades that collect stuff from the 90s, we don't get to see where this cliffhanger leads. And that's a little bit frustrating. I do wish that we could have seen a little bit more of where this story was leading to. But if you go back issue hunting, I guess you can do that. But overall, I didn't hate this book like I thought I would. I really didn't think that I would enjoy it, since I'm not really a fan of Bizarro at all. But it wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it would be. I liked it. Now, admittedly, I don't want to see Bizarro show up all the time. If he shows up just once in a blue moon, I'm okay with that. But I really don't need to see him show up more often than what he has so far in these Superman books. So that's about all that I have to say about Superman Bizarro's World. I hope that you guys liked this review, and if you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back tomorrow with a different video. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.